Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panelists that are here. Appreciate your testimony. I served in the state legislature before coming here to our nation's capital, and we had some robust debates about economic development back home in Michigan. I kind of start from the position that government doesn't create jobs. Government can create government jobs, but private industry creates the jobs that ultimately pay for government jobs. So you might maybe consider me a bit of a skeptic around some economic development programs and some of the lofty prognosis of what they are set to bring in, what accomplishments we've had, kind of glossing over some of the, failures of certain economic development programs that I think deserve rational debate. And then sometimes maybe the data that we get is a little bit optimistic. But with that being said, I do appreciate you being here today. I know that we have a lot of programs that were initiated during the COVID-19 pandemic. There was obviously a massive disruption to the economy, and Congress and really all levels of government took action to really manage as best we were able. And, in hindsight, maybe things could have been done differently, but I do acknowledge that there was a lot of uncertainty then. At the time, though, Congress provided the EDA with significant supplemental funding to support economic recovery, including, I think, $1.5 billion from the CARES Act, $3 billion from ARPA. The EDA played a sizable role in administering these COVID-related economic recovery funds that were intended to stabilize communities quickly, predominantly under the previous administration. Mr. Page, I'm curious if you know if these funds were targeted well and if they produced measurable results. And for COVID projects, did the EDA use the same performance metric framework that it currently uses for infrastructure, non-infrastructure data, or was some other metric used at that time?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. And yes, you're correct. We did receive substantial supplemental funding, $4.5 billion total through 2 supplementals in response to those. Many of those projects are still in development, and they are actually producing results now, particularly construction. A lot of the awards went out at the end of 2021, and they are just kind of finishing their design phase. They're about to enter into a construction, or they're in construction, but they're not quite complete. But I am happy to report that with our portfolio of grants that we have right now, $5.8 billion in total, we are seeing an 8-to-1 return on private investment for every dollar invested. That being said, we are actively monitoring these projects. We now have a risk assessment tool that we've put in place for every one of these awards to make sure that they are advancing. And if they are not, if for some reason the beneficiary has changed and therefore the actual expected value has changed, if there are complications, if there are cost overruns, we are willing to work with the applicant to terminate the grant.
Sure, and I appreciate that. I'm just to me, sometimes we force a idea that we're going to do something that the market may not necessarily otherwise demand. And I think, when it comes to infrastructure, those are community funded and then sometimes have state and federal money combined for, roads, bridges, pipelines, and other things that provide a benefit to everyone in that community and can hopefully then attract more economic development, less so than some other projects that may be like, oh, we're going to guarantee this many jobs, and then 10 years goes by and new people are sitting in your seat, in my seat, those jobs don't materialize, and it's impossible to hold accountable then at that point. And I want to make sure that we prevent that circumstance from happening. I guess, to go through a design phase for 5 years, we are 5 years post-2021 right now. I flipped the calendar over like everybody else a few weeks ago, and it said 2026 on it. How are we supposed to effectively deploy these resources when it takes 5 years to get through just a design phase of a project?
Yes, sir. And I should have said the CARES Act was earlier. The ARP funds did not deploy until a little bit later because they were appropriated in 2021. But at the end of the day, I understand what you're saying about the private investment. At EDA, we look at the private investment not as an outcome, but actually as a market signal that the investment that we're going to make actually has real benefit. We have named beneficiaries for projects that are local entities. Oftentimes, we will get letters of support from them, and then we do follow up at 3, 6, and 9 years to make sure that we are getting reporting from the grantee that those have actually materialized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.